Geekly! This week, we talk about Dave, interviews, and I'll review some recent stand-up specials. And now your host, Mike Indiglio!
That's me, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, team. My name is Mike Indiglio. Welcome to K&M Geekly. Just a sneak peek at two geeks talking about some of the things that got him through the week, getting him through as best as is possible in this dreary time. It's supposed to be spring. What do they say about April showers?
We're getting a lot of them.
Yeah. So
I got to admit something. I'm really happy I didn't just do. So in your intro, you usually say, "I'm Mike Indiglio. That's my buddy Keith," right? And so I usually go, "That's me." And I literally was cued to do it, and then you didn't say it, and then I aborted at the last second.
Yeah. Well,
good for me.
I like to switch.
I listened.
I like to swap it up.
That's listening.
I like to switch it up. That's the kind of week it's been. Bachelor Mike is still home alone. And it's rainy. There's so many chores to do. There's piles of laundry everywhere. It took not a lot of time for it to get real desolate over here at the Indiglio household, but
I understand. I think the weather certainly affects things, and loneliness, and life is complicated. Life's, I think I'm feeling sort of right there with you. The rain also reflects how I'm feeling right now, but that's okay.
Yeah,
because it's going to get better because we're going to talk about some nerdy stuff.
Yeah, it's been I'm excited to talk about one show that kind of aired years ago. The third season came out this week, and I had never even heard of the show. We'll talk about it in a second. A lot of other fun stuff. There's some new video games are out, Keith, that I'm starting to play that I haven't played enough to talk about on the show yet. There's two other announcements I'll make here on Geekly, although this is our least watched show, although a lot of people listening, so thanks to those who are just finding us on podcasts, so that's cool.
Well, you want to know who's listening? My mother, who today is her birthday.
Oh, so well, happy birthday to our number Mom. One listener, yeah.
She won't listen to this for another couple of weeks because she's just now catching up on the podcast, but she said she's through January into February.
Oh, thanks. That's awesome.
So happy birthday, Mom.
Yeah, lots of cool stuff. Speaking of moms, my mom is having her carpal tunnel surgery on Tuesday. I'm taking her in, so thank you all who have written in best wishes. That's really cool. I will absolutely let her know, and she will instantly forget. Mm-hmm. But that's cool. Also,
well, she won't know that you're doing a podcast? What's that?
Yeah, I know. Because sometimes when she's here, Keith, I actually literally have to do the show with her sitting on the couch right over there because she doesn't get that she shouldn't be here while I'm working. And I'm using the hardest quotes possible when I say working. Quickly, folks, because of these fine people Keith's going to tell you about in just 1 second, we have some cool announcements. One, coming up real soon, we finally got our first Star Trek Prodigy figure in. I know we're not the first outlet to receive them, but we've been vocal in our complaints about how long it was taking. So I got it from Canada. There's some more coming, hopefully. One is coming through DHL, which is, it's a janky system when DHL is sending it.
Woo! Shots fired for the fourth tier's delivery service.
Yeah, well, you heard it here. Don't at me. We don't have any legal representation. Number two, we announced to our patrons, but not to the audience as a whole, and I think we'll just take the opportunity to do it now. We have a new show on the channel.
Yes,
called, creatively entitled Strange New Show, where Keith and Mike will discuss the Star Trek Strange New Worlds show airing on Paramount Plus. We're going to do it just like we do our Deep Space Nine show, in depth and too long. Those are the two things we promise you. So we have if you're a patron, or if you'd like to maybe become a patron, you can see us watching the pilot and talking all about it and over it and discussing it in our first reactions. And a lot of our patrons have already watched and commented. They're excited. We're excited. So you can join the team at patreon.com/KNM. Keith, who's already checking out our pilot episode.
And checking out. And this is a different show because Deep Space Nine, I've seen them all. I'm like a nerd. I've never seen Strange New Worlds, so we're both seeing it completely fresh. And the folks who can do that right now are Bryant, Kimball, Beersock, Brian Kaufman, Casey Clark, Jason, Mo, Bren, Joshua, Andrew Hayes, Jorge Naboa, and the mysterious Worf's Boat Shivs, Richard Coleman, Charles Babbage, CRM Productions, Nikolai Ivanovich Lobachevsky, at Grim Toys, Delusions at Noons, JD Makes, Colin Dagan, Chris Mitchell, and Pat. And a special shout out to Charles Babbage, who supplied us with images of the Falcon Prize, a video you can see right this very minute in your feed if you ever wanted to see if, the Millennium Falcon and the USS Enterprise, they hit it off. And sometimes when two ships love each other very much, we get the USS Falcon, Mike.
Yeah, very exciting. I wanted it instantly. Nice folks on our channel have already offered to make it for me. And someone, I just found out today with one of the comments, Keith, I have no details on this, but if you're interested, apparently someone has made it available to 3D print. So if you have access to download that file apparently on the internet, and then you can make your very own if you have a 3D printer. I don't know how any of that crap works.
But people have had a lot to say. I should really catch up on the comments. I'm like, oh, this is all news to me.
Yeah. I had an audition last week. So I'm like, you check your email every 30 minutes to see if you got the job or not. And if you get to a certain point in your life, you kind of are checking the email to hope that maybe you didn't get the job so you can like plan your week and not have to worry about it. It's a weird anxiety thing. But in doing that, I've seen all the comments. I haven't had a chance to get back to anybody yet myself because, Keith, like we said, we're staring down the barrel of a very long week coming up. But let's talk some geekly stuff.
Let's do it.
I want to actually start. You know what? Let's bookend stuff. I'll start, then we'll put the comedy stuff in the middle because you're watching some stuff I want to check out, so I want to hear about it. But first, let me talk to you about a show called Dave. Oh, I did the thing again. Oh. So,
wait. Is this different from Dave's World, which we referenced?
Yes.
Guys, would you like to hear Mike's flawless impression of the lead character of Dave in Dave's World?
So, listen, I'm going to venture a guess that a lot of you know about this show because apparently, Keith, it is hugely popular, hugely successful, and memeable, and this guy is like a huge talent, and I had never even heard about it. I had tangentially heard about it, and I swear to you right now, what I thought for some reason was that this was a reboot of. Do you remember the movie Dave?
I love the movie Dave.
Yeah,
there's a musical that I guess is not coming.
Yes, but in my brain, remembering the movie Dave, for some reason, I conflated it with the movie, the rom-com of Annette Bening and Michael Douglas, The American President from the 90s, which is also great.
There's a lot of overlap there.
Yes, not the Kevin Kline joint, which is also a great movie. Regardless, I thought these were reboots of one of those properties, and I had no interest in that. Those things are great on their own. We don't need them. So this weekend, I decided I saw it on Hulu because I was on the Hulu, and I said, "Oh, that doesn't look like those things. Let me listen to it." And here's the premise of this show. And I didn't pull up my Wikipedia, so let's just keep it cash. This guy Dave is an actual actor. Rapper and also an executive producer on the show. He writes the show, does all the music, he does everything. And it is loosely based on his actual life and career. And he's just a Jewish rapper who is a comedy rapper in sort of the way you would think of like his bar. A lot of the bars he spits is very. That's the terminology, Keith. He spits bars.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm a comedy rapper too.
Yeah. So, but at the same time, he's also very subversive, and he lives in the genre of like. Apologies if this isn't the prop. I don't know how the genres break down, but I believe it's pretty hard hitting gangster rap, pretty much. All into this sort of self-aggrandizement, the very sexually exploitative type stuff, but he's incredibly fast flow, incredibly smart. He's at times just doing dick and fart jokes. His rapper name is Little Dicky, making fun of these surgeries he had as a child to fix his broken dick, which has pretty much mutilated it, but he talks about it. And
it's like my heart.
It's all kinds of stuff. But he's also in the show, at least in the fiction of the show, he's just an incredible narcissist. And it's he truly believes he lives at the bridge of out of delusional narcissism mixed with just extreme confidence that he's really talented and can only reach his dreams if he embraces his belief in himself. So it is so many things under the level of, but it's also incredibly funny. Really, it's not for your kids. It's very graphic in some ways, and it's really blurred as to how much is. It's like almost like Curb Your Enthusiasm, where it's supposed to be him, but it's making fun of him, and there's a lot of people from the hip hop community. It's about chasing your dreams and then achieving them and then stardom. And then at the end of the first episode, the pilot, he actually raps, and you're like, oh, he can back it all up. Because the pilot and the premise, when you first jump into this universe, it is absurd. The dichotomy of like this rapper who's this very stereotypically Jewish character, nothing should work. Nothing about this should work. And then you watch the pilot, and then at the end he raps, and you're like, oh, wait, what? And then, Keith, blink, it's 6:00 in the morning, and I've plowed through the first 2 seasons. The episodes are bite-sized. They're shot incredibly well. They're mixed incredibly well. They're 28 minutes. And so I just plowed through the first 2 seasons, and I just started season 3 right before this podcast today. This show, no wonder it was popular. Go figure. It's amazing.
Okay, great. I mean, I've never heard of it either, so I'm excited to
absolutely watch a couple episodes and see. I mean, it's not going to be for everybody because it is a lot. It is so many things. It is a lot, but there is a deep-rooted heart to it. And what's really interesting, in the best of ways, is we as television viewing audiences love a hero, but we also love an anti-hero. And Dave, for me, even to the first 3 seasons, is both of those things. He is literally 2 people. He's his stage persona and his life persona. Right. And there's something to like about both of those things, but there's also a lot to dislike about each of those things. And that's all of us, isn't it? In some sort of percentage, at least, not as blown over, not as over the top as this, but it really, and can you hold down a relationship? What's his relationship with his friends? What is cultural appropriation? What is satire? Does it matter if it's satire? Can it still be cultural appropriation?
Sure, yeah.
So many things. And because he is the one writing a lot of it, it's not always black and white what the viewpoint is and what the viewer's viewpoint is. They don't always mesh. So it is just, and the music is great. He's really good and funny. So yeah. And also, and Keith, actually, this speaks to you in some ways. What if, what you do, or what the thing that people notice about you, right, in pop culture, is your comedy, right? But what if you're so much more than that, and then you get pigeonholed into one thing? What is that experience like? It's really cool. It has a lot to say, maybe too much to say at times, but you know what? You're swinging for the fences. I'm in. So this is Dave. It's all 3 seasons are available on Hulu right now. And it's also an FX show. So if you don't have Hulu and you have the FX on whatever cable, I think you can probably get it on demand. I can't recommend it high enough. I know that I'm late to the party, but Dave.
No, it sounds interesting. It sounds like something that's definitely up my alley. And it's very interesting having done some similar stuff, right? Having written a show that I star in as a version of myself, and sort of you have 4 characters, right? Because you have you have 5. You're playing 5 characters because you have your true self, as in Keith the person. You have the Keith the person that you present to the world. Then you have the writer who is creating this thing, and then the character that you write has a real self and a false self. Yep. So there's like 5 layers of people at least happening anytime you do that. And I think it's fascinating. I'd like to see that.
Yeah, it's really good, and it does it in such a weird way. And there's these side characters who are all important. None of them are. It's just a really good show, but incredibly different than even anything you're expecting from my explanation here. It's still different than that. I'm excited. I really want you to watch and let me know what you think.
Okay, great.
So yeah, let's pop in. So what? We've clearly, it's gloomy out there. We clearly need a laugh, Keith. How might we get that?
Well, we might get that from a bunch of other fantastic comedians that I've been enjoying who have a lot of specials out there. Interestingly, Mark Maron did a very similar thing to this guy. He wrote a show about himself where he played a version of himself going through his career, which is so it's very fascinating. And
is it
John
a stand-up
Mulaney's
show or is it a one-man show? Because it's kind of different.
Oh no, he wrote a TV show also on FX.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
That was like about Mark. It was basically himself 5 years before in success, trying to make his way in the comedy world. Anyway, it's and Mulaney's. I never saw Mulaney's sitcom, but I feel like it was also about him.
Yeah, I did not. I saw the weird Netflix show he did with the Jump Along Bunch or whatever. That was cool.
Oh, it's hilarious.
Weird,
it's fantastic,
cool. And Big Mouth is like my favorite show. So
yeah, well, yeah. I mean, it's brilliant. So Mark Maron and John Mulaney just recently put out new stand-up specials. Mark Maron's was on HBO Max, From Bleak to Dark, and John Mulaney's just came out on Netflix this week. And I think I just wanted to sort of like talk about both of them and how they are similar and different. And for those who don't know Mark Maron, he's been a comedian since the 90s, for forever. And he was sort of the typical 90s like angry comic. And he was dealing with addiction at the time. And he sort of crashed and burned and resurrected his career by starting a podcast. WTF, What the Fuck Podcast with Mark Maron, which is now one of the most famous, largest podcasts in history.
I think it's probably not a stretch to say that he sort of was the one who lit the fuse on the podcast
podcasts in general.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if podcasting had founding fathers, he would be very much one of them, and doing phenomenal, deep diving, raw interviews with everybody you could ever conceive of, from his fellow comic buddies to Obama. Right? He's interviewed everybody, and I think he and Terry Gross are probably the best two interviewers on the planet right now. Anyway, but his stand-up is very autobiographical. It's long-form storytelling. It's dark. It's real. He's gone through some just horrific tragedies over the last couple of years. And while being somebody who's been in recovery for 20-something years, him telling this story from Bleak to Dark is basically a lot of it is about his girlfriend dying right in front of him during COVID, just overnight out of nowhere, and how difficult that was. But he still finds a way to make it terrifically funny and heartfelt and deep and emotional. And he's very, very smart. I think, a lot of most comedians come from a place of pain, of real shit, of trauma, of whatever. And the best ones are able to mine that in ways that are both productive, raw, and funny all at the same time, which is very much possible to do. Which brings me to John Mulaney, who has been one of my favorite comedians for a long time. He's insanely funny. He's spent his career sort of making a lot of fun with very specific New York isms. Mm-hmm. And like, if you live in New York, he's really just down in the very, very specific world. But he's always had a bit of a wall up. He's always been, he's not like joke, but when he's telling autobiographical stories, you don't really get to know who he is very much. He's very shiny. And
I would venture to say slick. He's always come across writer first,
right? And he's a good performer. And I think Big Mouth, like you said, the show he does with Nick Kroll, the animated one on Netflix, is the most honest depiction of puberty I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. It is talk about raw, talk about like be careful.
I've wanted to say this. I've said it on previous shows. I don't know if I said it on this podcast, so I'll say it for an audience and whatever cross. I truly mean this. This is the highest compliment I can give Big Mouth. Until I was 40 years old when I started watching that show, I guess, or whenever it was, 39, 40 years old, I really believed in the back of my head that I was some sort of sexual deviant because of a lot of the many of the thoughts and things that I did and thought
that
during
you go through puberty.
And to even see, even in an animated form, references and overt
everybody is that
and I was
way.
Like, oh, the relief. The years, I'm talking probably 20 years of therapy this show just summed up and did for me in in a season. I'm not being hyperbolic. It made me realize I was a normal human being, and that is a high bar, man.
And honestly, I think that's tremendously valuable, and maybe why I was going to say, don't let your kids, maybe make your kids watch it, because they will feel seen. I mean, the hormone monster and the shame wizard and the whatever. Anyway,
Depression Kitty,
Depression. It's brilliant.
Yeah,
it's hard hitting, but it is also incredibly honest. That is how we feel. That is what we think.
CEO Jen to this day won't watch it because she's like, I'm not into animated stuff, and it viscerally makes me mad. It's one of our only fights we have because I was like, you're dismissing the best show. Okay, continue. Sorry.
Anyway, so Mulvaney's new special now is very different. Because as he points out right at the beginning of the special, hey, since my last special, I got divorced and went to rehab, and people think I'm different now. And so he's having to reemerge with a rawer, more honest version of himself. And this special is, for the first time, it basically is the story of his addiction and his recovery throughout the last year. It's no longer about, the bodega and no longer about the whatever. It is the story of what he went through. And in the very recent past, like Marin talks about his days in addiction from 20 years ago. He's like, yeah, this was 18 months ago. And I think it's really fascinating. The difference is, though, he tells a lot of stories about what he did, but I don't think he reveals very much about who he is or why. And I think that's, and that is very much his right? It's none of our business to get into who the heck is John Mulvaney. We know a lot about the way he thinks, and we know what he's done. But I think I would be curious to see what his follow-up is and whether or not he opens that part of himself. We are not entitled to it, right?
Right.
He doesn't have to, but I think it might elevate what he's doing in a different way and be really fascinating the way Marin does. So it's still very funny. It's still definitely worth a watch on Netflix. And while I was thinking about comics, there's lots of other comics that I really like, Tig Notaro and such. But I wanted to point out Fortune Feimster, who is a relatively newer comic, relatively younger comic, who I think is about to come out with her second Netflix special.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw her first. I saw her on a breakout special, and then I saw her first full special. She is so delightful.
Yes. Energy.
Also very autobiographical. All of the comics that I really like are talking about themselves and their lives and their experiences growing up and all the funny things. And I think that it's incredibly relatable, right? Even though Fortune growing up as a lesbian in the South has a very different life experience than I had. Mm-hmm. However, there's so much universality about feeling uncomfortable in middle school and feeling different and feeling weird and so I find her incredibly relatable and super, super funny. So definitely check out Fortune's stuff. And to sort of get to the point about why I like the comics that I like, right? It doesn't need to be long form storytelling, although I like that best. I'm not averse to joke, right? But what I like about all of these comics is they never punch down. There are so many different comics and comedy styles that are about punching down and talking about, the women or the gays or the trans or the minorities or whatever. And like, being an asshole is easy.
Mhm.
And you can be funny being an asshole, right? It can still be funny, and you have every right to do it. However, I have the belief that you're a douchebag, and I don't have to watch you. Anytime a comedian punches down, whether it's economic class, whether it's race, whether it's gender, whether it's whatever, and are making jokes at the expense of somebody vulnerable, I think you're being lazy, and I think you're being an asshole, and you don't need it to be funny. So many of these comedians are like, oh, I can't make jokes about anything. Well, you can, but I'm going to think you're an asshole, and I'm not going to watch you. You don't. If you're such a shitty comedian that you can't find a way to be funny without making fun of somebody below you, punch up. You want to make fun of the president, right? Punch up. You want to make fun of people in power, people of privilege, absolutely. But just anybody who punches down is gross to me. And what I really love about the comedians that I like is that is not where their comedy comes from. So
yeah, that's a whole podcast episode in its own right. But I will say that it's easy in this kind of hypersensitized discourse right now, online and in the media and everywhere culturally, to say something, to think something with any nuance, right? Everything has to be broad stroked and black and white. You're for something, you're against something, and that's comedy is a harder nut to crack because I think you would agree with me, but I'll speak for myself. I believe, especially in comedy, free speech rules, and you should say whatever the hell you want. Make fun of whoever you want. Tell the joke you want. Good taste, bad taste, whatever. People will find it funny. People won't find it funny. Like Keith said, though, that doesn't mean I have to watch you, agree with you, or think it's right. As you get more popular, your Dave Chappelle's, your Chris Rock's, the list goes on, and you become richer and more wealthy on the things you say, it's easier to start to feel a little ickier when you are crossing lines just to make the statement, I can cross lines because I have to preserve the sanctity of comedy or whatnot. When in reality now you just seem like a bitchy rich person, right? So that's your hurdle to jump. What Keith is talking about, and I think I think Mark Maron and podcasts and these in-depth, very honest and authentic interviews we've gotten used to through podcasts and such, have opened the door to comics able to avoid all of that controversy, let's call it, by just going inward, like you said. The more hyper-specific, we've talked about this on the podcast and other media, the more hyper-specific you get in telling a story, the more it generalizes and makes it applicable to more people. And so I don't need to punch down. I mean, if your comedy writing is about yourself and your personal struggles and your observations, it's much easier to avoid all of that crap. So I don't know what point I'm trying to make.
I think the point you're making is, and it's ground we've covered before, in terms of like cancel culture or whatever. It's like, yes, you are entitled to say anything that you want. Anything. You are absolutely entitled to say whatever the fuck you want. However, you are not entitled to say anything without consequences.
Yeah, there you go.
It's not that free speech doesn't mean free speech with no consequences. And it does not entitle you to my business or my attention. So, if you are, like, Dave Chappelle's a perfect example. Dude is a genius. He's hilarious, but he punches down sometimes, and I don't understand why. It is gross and really defeats the purpose of what he's doing. He became a genius because he was punching up, right? He was so good because he was like, I'm in a disadvantaged place. Let me punch the people in my way who are getting in the way. But now he's at that place, and now he's punching down, and that reveals character, right? Your speech reveals your character. And as you are entitled to say whatever you want, I am entitled to infer from that whether or not you're a decent person. And I think that is, I think that comedy is scary, right? Because whether you're doing it well or not, it will reveal you, right? Comedy will expose you for who you are, and
Yeah.
that's part of why it's dangerous, and it's part of why it's exciting.
Just don't sit in the front row if you go. Because then you will be, it won't be punching up or down, it'll be punching directly straight and at you.
Well, just, sit down, shut up, and laugh.
Yeah. So, before podcasts and Marin and Rogan, all those guys get into these in-depth, conversations, there was interviews, Keith, existed for only a few folks. You had to be an Oprah, you had to be a Diane Sawyer, you had to be
Baba Wawa.
Barbara was the big one, and of course, the love of my life on CBS Sunday Morning. So Keith, those things still are happening. But I've just stopped really watching. I love CBS Sunday Morning. I watch it every Sunday. But I was flicking through the YouTube, and I will say this: a lot of celebrities, I just don't get caught up in celebrities very much. I'm not like the royal wedding and the TMZs.
Are you not keeping up with the Kardashians, Mike?
No, I just don't care about that stuff very much. However, I was flicking through the YouTube because I was watching Dave, and it was like, hey, we just released, and this is now available on YouTube or on Hulu because it's Disney owned, ABC, and also available on Disney Plus. Is where did I put it? Diane Sawyer's interview with Jeremy Renner. She had a sit down with Jeremy Renner. And on CBS Sunday Morning this morning, available on demand for this week's episode, Michael J. Fox sat down with Jane Pauley. And both were, your general fluff pieces. I mean, it's very much, there's a very scripted type of way these type of interviews go. They don't go too deep, and they're pretty much written to be just like 2 clicks above puff piece,
Right.
But
publicist approved.
But that said, Jeremy Renner and Michael J. Fox are 2 people who are ostensibly, and I think above reproach, very good human beings. They've done incredible charitable work, incredible humanitarian work, and also I really enjoy their performances in movies and TV and such. So I watched both of these interviews, and I think Jane Pauley and Diane Sawyer are very good at what they do. The interviews don't go too deep, but they are very personal. And Jeremy Renner specifically, Michael J. Fox, most people know that story. And it's just a continued look at how he is progressing in his disease and still doing the work, raising money for research and recovery. And also, it was a highlight of his upcoming documentary, which I'm super psyched about, and we will talk about. It's going to be on Apple TV May 12th. It's called Still. I think we should both watch that and talk about it because it looks to be pretty powerful. But I wanted to talk mostly about this Jeremy Renner interview because I was unaware of the details of the accident he was in. And it is horrific. And what's really cool about this interview is that it focuses mostly on all of the little miracles along the way that led to him being alive. And the majority of them are normal, everyday people. He lives up in northern Nevada, like in the mountains, in this like log home where this all happened. And the only reason he's alive is because a couple of his neighbors were home. His nephew knew what to do in an emergency. And doctors, his family, and normal everyday people are helping him on this recovery. Here's this multi-millionaire famous man, and his life is spared because of everyday people. And the interview is filled with not just saying it was miracles, right? No, it's talking about the people who helped him and then him getting to talk to some of them and say thank you. And, it's like a little bit made so it's tearjerkery, but damned if it didn't work. I got some misty because he is filled with gratitude, and it was humbling and it's great. It was juxtaposed because they just released his new series on Disney Plus called Renovations, where he basically renovates old trucks, old fire trucks, old municipal vehicles, and gives them back to communities as repurposed. So he created a library in one. He created a music studio for downtown Chicago in one. All kinds of cool stuff. So all in all, it's just, these are just 2 interviews with like good people who are doing something positive with their A, tragic circumstances, and also B, wealth and fame and acclaim. So the sit down short form interview piece, news magazine piece is alive and well, Keith, and at times I think still worth your time, even in a media landscape that is full of much deeper, much more authentic interviews with people. So both things can coexist, and I'm glad to see it. So you can check both of those out. CBS Sunday Morning you should be watching because it's just still the most delightful part of my week every week. And also, I don't know where the ABC Diane Sawyer thing originally aired, but who knows anymore? Everything is available everywhere. So there you go.
Cool.
Yeah.
Interviews. How about it?
Interviews. Who knew? How do I kick this out now? Okay, so that I'm gonna do that and then let's just do a quick weekly rad. I know we always think about it at the last second, but you got anything? You got anything for me?
I think about it when you ask me.
Yeah.
Every time. Well, all right. So I'll keep mine short and sweet. My weekly rad is the sense of community that I get every year at this time. I'm wearing my Boston Bruins jersey. We have Game 7 tonight. At the end of the night, I'm going to be very sad or very happy, and I don't know which one it's going to be. It was Game 7. I was talking to my mom, and what I really like about playoff hockey time, for me personally, I'm sure there's a lot of different sports and a lot of different family structures or whatever, but it's something that myself and my family and some of the people in my life really, really care about. And we have a sense of community that is sometimes difficult, right? But for 2 hours or 3 hours every other night in the playoff series, we're all hoping for the same thing. And we're all pulling for the same. And we know that it's not real, and yet it is. And we were my mother and I were laughing about how the fact that how the Bruins are doing genuinely affects our mood, which is so silly because it's not real, it's fake. And yet we are very much emotionally wrapped up in this, and it's exciting and it's fun, and sometimes you win and sometimes you lose, but there is a sense of community with the sports and with your teams, and something I really enjoy.
This is the best part, I think, because this month specifically, we have got the NBA Finals. You could be not into basketball. I'm not into hockey, but playoffs are playoff sports. If you're not a sports person, the only thing that can convince you that maybe you should be is playoff sports. And the best part about playoff sports is you don't have to follow anything. Anything that happened in the regular season doesn't matter anymore. If you don't know the teams or you don't know the rules, just pick a team. Pick a team. There's probably a story on that team to give you some emotional investment, and go with it. The 76ers, round 2, we've got the best player in the league, the MVP of the league, but guess what? He just hurt his knee. So what's going to happen? We're going up against our arch rivals. Can we overcome? Or hey, maybe you hate the previous champions, the Golden State Warriors. Well, guess what? They're in a Game 7 against a 7 seed. They're the one, whatever. And there's stuff happening in sports right now. So check it out. Or hockey. If you're not a hockey person, this guy. Guess what? The Boston Bruins setting all kinds of records, making all kinds of score. They're scoring more points than anybody. But guess what? They're on Game 7. They could be out of it tomorrow.
We might lose, and I will be so.
Yeah, that's why we're doing it on Sunday beforehand, because I don't want to risk the beast tomorrow. Although we have to do Deep Space Nine tomorrow. So okay.
Yeah, Deep Space Nine. I mean, it's either going to be like it's 100 or it's a 0.
It might be Depressed Space Nine. Okay. So, anyways, sports. Who knew? I'll quickly say, I've been harping on this train for a few weeks now, but I'm going to keep doing it about the kids, Keith. So my wife and I had done a book club with each other with this book by an author named T.J. Klune. The book is called The House on the Cerulean Sea, which is a mouthful. And I'll give you the quick elevator pitch for the book. There's a guy in a fantasy world. He is a caseworker for all these little, ostensibly boarding schools for magical creatures across the world. And he has to go and sort of audit them and see if they're worth their salt, okay? He goes to one, he meets all the magical kids and has to decide whether to give them funding or whatnot, and you get to know all the kids, and it's about being different and accepting, it's a what do they call them, a YA book, right? So it's made for young audiences. But there happens to be, and it caused a stink in the beginning, there happens to be well, he's kind of I don't know how to vocabularize it, but it's ostensibly a homosexual romance Of course, there's like magical creatures involved, so but it's not really about that. It's not that, that's like a side plot, okay? But of course, cultural warriors on certain side of the aisle made it a big fucking deal, and because it's a YA book and we shouldn't be exposing kids to that. It's like the whole drag thing we were talking about.
Yeah, don't say gay, because that'll stop it.
I really enjoyed the book. I thought it was sweet, and I thought it was uplifting, and I thought the character was really interesting, and so I really liked the book. It has nothing to do it had nothing to do with any of that plot, right? So anyway, I recommended it to my niece, who is 13, 14 years old, because she's huge into reading now. She's like a vociferous reader. So I was like, oh, I really like this. It's a quick read it. Just saw her yesterday. We were chit-chatting about it, Keith. She loved so many things about the book, all this stuff. We had a long conversation about it. You know what didn't come up once? Do you know what didn't come up one time? The word gay, the idea of the fact that these two, she thought it was really sweet. She was so happy they got together at the end. We didn't even have a conversation about, she didn't have any questions. I thought I was prepared for a conversation. She's 13, so I don't know. I mentioned this to you, we live in a very white community, and there's not a lot of cultural diversity, let alone sexual diversity. I thought nothing. It just was like, none of the concepts blew her mind or melted her down or caused any sort of grief or depression. My point is, once again, all of these problems are just political thought. They're not real to the generation that is coming up and makes any difference.
Of course it is. And this is why representation matters, right?
Yeah.
Because you see people, if you see diversity everywhere, diversity isn't a thing. It's just people, right? Mm-hmm. And when you celebrate, and I don't mean by that be colorblind. No, we celebrate the diversity. We don't ignore diversity. We celebrate diversity. We represent diversity, and then it's not that big of a deal. Mm-hmm. And then the kids are like, who cares? And the adults who need a wedge to force authoritarianism on us need to find some reason, somebody vulnerable we can punch down on to distract you from all the nonsense. But thankfully, kids smell bullshit a little bit better than adults do. So awesome. Great.
Cool book. Yeah, cool book. All right, folks. Well, there you go. Make sure that you check out our Patreon and maybe check out, throw some dollars down for at least a month and check out that first us watching Strange New show, which will be coming out, I'd say in about 2 weeks, probably. We'll get it on the YouTube.
Yeah.
Also, we've got this past weekend, check out our feed. We've got the Falcon Prize, which is really cool. Someone said they didn't like that as much. They liked USS
Falcon.
Yeah, they like that better. But I mean, they're not the arbiter of what's good. Also, this coming
we got to change it.
Sometime this week, we'll have the first of our Star Trek Prodigy first look / reviews. We've got Deep Space Nine. There's so much happening on the channel. We appreciate all of you. If you don't feel like being a patron, you can go ahead and like and subscribe. Leave us a comment. Just engage. Super tip if you want, if you're feeling frisky. But your 45 minutes of time means a lot to both Keith and I, especially in these gloomy days. So we appreciate you. We appreciate you. That's really the long and short of it, Keith. And I appreciate you, buddy. I was at a funeral this weekend, and I want to keep reminding myself to tell the people I care about that I care about them. So Keith's mom, everybody involved, everybody watching, whether we know each other or not, I appreciate you.
Likewise.
Thankful for you. So until next time, I'm Mike. That's Keith. Don't let anybody yuck your yum. Keep on doing those things you find fun, and keep on geeking on.